Hi there. So it's early February, first week of February, well below zero today, but nevertheless, it's time to start sowing spring seeds next week. So I'm just out here in my tunnel. Thankfully, it is sunny out, so despite being cold and windy outside today, it's actually really nice and balmy. It's just above 20 degrees Celsius today in the tunnel. So nice working here. Nice little reprieve from the winter. So today what I'm doing is transitioning my summer fall setup in the center table to my spring heat mat setup for starting seeds in the early spring and summer. We'll go over everything, but this is a cheap way to get your seeds germinating outside in an unheated tunnel. Um, Earlier than you could maybe without a setup like this, and it's pretty cheap to do.
Okay, here we go.
So before we get going, please hit that subscribe button down below, like the video, all that good stuff. So what I'm doing is taking the summertime setup here, which is basically your standard hardware cloth on 2x4s. Pretty commonly seen setup here. I'm just using these brackets style sawhorses for my legs. As you can see, very easy to set up. And then I've got some framing here. Oh, it looks like I still have a screw pinning it down. Oh no, it's just a bit heavy. Okay. Anyway, so this is just a standard table. What I'm going to do is, because I have a very, very small operation, very small scale, very limited space as an urban farmer. I don't have acreage. I don't have a storage barn or anything like that. Everything's got to be multi-purpose if possible. So this table here um, is where I do like drying onions and garlic and stuff in the fall. Um, but I'm going to flip this table, insulate it, add some in-floor heating, and then cover it up with another tunnel so that I can get my seedlings started here in early February in Canada, so that I can get a jump start as soon as the ground thaws. I can start planting my starts and be ready to go. As you can see right now, it's just basic half-inch hardware cloth. I've got fencing nails here, tacking it down, um, and then I'll show you how I've framed it all up so that it's multifaceted and can hold some insulation in it without bulging too much. So here we go. Okay, so I've got the table flipped here, and I'll just quickly show you how I framed this up so that you can nest insulation in these little quarters here and not have it lift up above your edge so it sits flush with your framing, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So this is just a 2x4 frame. I've got it into two pieces because the insulation comes in 8-foot lengths, so I've just kind of sized it based on that. I'm using 2x4s for the main frame, and then on the inside here, I'm using 2x3 lumber, and then that gives a little bit of space here to allow the insulation layer to sit on top and stay flush with the rest of the frame. So I'm going to go ahead, throw down the insulation, and then we'll jump to the next step. Okay, so this is an opportunity to learn from my mistakes rather than doing things exactly the way that I've done them here. Um, I had the right idea in mind when I built this last year in putting the 2x3 boards in the middle of the 2x4 frame, but I got my math wrong when I was figuring out the size and the thickness of the insulation that I used. So there is like a little bit of a difference here when they're flat. You can see there's a little bit of an edge, but when there's weight on there, it doesn't make a difference. In any case, make sure you always measure twice, cut once, or buy once, rather. This is more just to show you the concept and the idea behind my particular design. There's also other ways of doing this. If you want to do this in a more permanent fashion, you can switch from the hardware cloth kind of flipping setup that I've got going on here, and you can create something permanent where instead of like this kind of foam insulation that I'm using, you would actually put in a sand layer. You'd have a solid bottom instead of the hardware cloth. You put in a sand layer or even concrete if you're really permanent, and you'd embed your heating lines into that, and that creates a heat sink because they will hold on to that heat throughout the night when this passive heat from the sun isn't warming the tunnel, and maintain that heat a lot better while the cables are running versus this, which is mostly just to keep the heat from escaping downwards, which doesn't really do that much anyway, but it's just an extra kind of added layer of insulation that it's not going to hurt. So anyway, now that I have the insulation down, the next step is to put in my heating source. So what I'm using is in-floor heating. Here we have the insulation layer on top of the flipped regular table, and now I'm going to add my in-floor heating, which is rolled up over here. So let's do that real quick. Okay, I've got the in-floor heating in now. This isn't, pretty, but it's going to be effective. I did find actually last year that along the outer edges, I didn't quite get the same germination, obviously, as right down the middle. But all I have to do really is every couple days give it the trays a 180-degree flip, or just rotate them as I'm sliding new seedlings down, and that mitigated the fact. The other thing too is I'm always sowing about 10 to 30% more than I need. So those ones on the edges, those fringe kind of seedlings that maybe aren't as vigorous from the get-go, are okay because I use those for filler. Once you do your transplants, those extra 10 to 30% are like spares that for any plants that don't make it after transplant or for whatever reason they fail. It's actually nice having some that are a little bit like maybe a week behind, so that when their turn comes for like that next week after the initial transplanting, when you're going back through and seeing if anything needs to be filled in, that means that those ones that germinated maybe like 6 or 7 days later, even 4 or 5 days later, are going to be just reaching their stride and ready to like primed for transplanting at the perfect time. So just trying to take that, always trying to look at things in the most optimistic way possible, or trying to take advantage of things that may initially seem like a flaw and spinning it so that you can use it as a strength instead. So anyway, all that is to say that I could take some time to widen out and spread out this wire a little bit more, but for the amount of time it'll take me to do that, I'm happy with the results I got last year, so I'm just going to leave it. This isn't a major, it's not a game-changing decision in my opinion, so I'm just going to leave it. Anyway, that brings us to the next step. The next step is to put this heavy-duty, I think this is a 6 mil pond liner. The next step is to unroll the pond liner, which kind of acts as a waterproofing device or a barrier to keep the electrical stuff separate from the moisture and everything when I'm watering, etc. It also acts as somewhat of a heat sink, so during the day having a nice thick, heavy, black material helps to it enhances that warming effect that you want in the spring, because these are going to be coming out on really quite cold days for the next few weeks as I start to sow here in February. So, without further ado, let's roll out the black carpet. Okay, so I've got the pond liner down. It is still dirty from last year. That's a-okay. Smells great. Smells like rubber. Now, so we've got the frame, which is just a regular table flipped over, and then insulation layer. We've got our in-floor heating layer, and then the final layer, which is the pond liner. This is basically a glorified heating mat that you would normally use for germination, but it's one big piece rather than daisy chaining all kinds of small heat mats. I find this just to be so much easier to set up, and I can just kind of set it and forget it. I know plants prefer different germination temperatures and everything like that, but anyway, this is almost ready. The next step is to set up the housing for the hoops. So you can use different things for this. Basically what I'm talking about is when you get, when it's time to set up your plastic over top of all of this, you're going to need hoops to hold up your plastic, just like a regular tunnel up here. So I'm going to use some repurposed irrigation tubing. I like the white stripe because it's firmer. You can use the blue stripe too, but it's more apt to bend. So really easy, cheap. Every farmer has offcuts of this lying around. I'm using these little straps for all kinds of different stuff. So anyway, what I do is I just screw these in right through the mat. You can see actually the holes here from where they were before. I just screw these right into the framing, and then I slide in the hoops into these. You can also use, if you want something more permanent, brand new, or something that fits a little better, you can use PVC tubing and really size it all so it fits properly. I'd rather just recycle stuff. So the next step is to screw these in to the side. The reason why I've got one with a washer and one without is so that the washer is pinched up against the frame, which stops the pull or the hoop from sliding up and down. Because I'm just using regular wire low tunnel hoops. I'm not using PVC. So like I buy these in bulk, so I've always got them lying around. PVC. It's not like I don't know if you've ever looked into Curtis Stone or watched any of his videos or read his book. It's much different times than when he started off. A lot of these things that he was buying back when he bootstrapped his farm were a fraction of the cost of what they are today. Like he was buying. I'm pretty sure his book quotes a 10 foot um, metal conduit for your low tunnels outside. Like a 10 foot conduit back then was like $3 to $5. Now it's $20 each. It's just crazy the way things have soared in the past 5-10 years. So anyway, these hoops are going to slide in like this. These are just the regular old wire hoops. I've bent them on the corners so that plants aren't, when they get taller, the leaves aren't brushing up against the poly. So this is the next step. I'm just going to drill these in, stick the hoops up, and then I've got some PVC in storage, some plastic for the hoop, and that'll be that. So let's get at this. Let's screw this stuff in here now. All right. So I had to abort work yesterday and take care of some other things. So it's the next day. Sun's not shining. It's a little colder outside. However, not windy and still bearable. Anyway, so I have finished screwing in the tubes, the irrigation tubes for my hoops. As you can see, it's very simple design. As I mentioned earlier, I've got my uh, washer right here, and then the bottom one doesn't need a washer. This bottom one is just so that it doesn't swing left and right like this, just to keep it vertical, plumb. And so this is a really easy way of building out a heat mat. I'm just going to put in the hoops now. As you can see, I was talking earlier how they're bent. So these just slide in. If I can get that in right there. One on that side, the other here. And you can see how the washer stops it from sliding any further down. So that's the purpose of the washer. And I've got some plastic in storage. I'm just going to throw that over there, but that's the gist of it. And then this is my control temperature control, and I just screw that basically to the frame right here. You can see where it was screwed in before. So yeah, that's going to control my temperature. It's got a little probe that you stick in the soil to keep the temperature accurate, and I just plug that in with an extension cord. Not ideal, but it works. So yeah, if you're on a budget and you want to make one big heat mat in your nursery, this is one way of doing it. This is how I do it. If you don't know, now you know.